Attorney General Raul Torres has announced the New Mexico Department of Justice will launch an investigation following a 16-year-old's tragic death in foster care. Civil rights advocates and local leaders are raising concerns about increasing militarization at New Mexico's southern border. With Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham out of the country on a trade mission, Lieutenant Governor Howie Morales has been acting governor and has been signing several executive orders. New Mexico's Museum of Natural History and Science is set to close its doors for 7 months as it undergoes renovations. And a group of airmen from Holloman Air Force Base have graduated from one of its programs. From the Albuquerque Journal, this is the leading news. I'm Gino Gutierrez. It's Wednesday, April 23rd, and I'll have more on those stories in a few moments, plus a look at Albuquerque's weather forecast on the other side of this break.
This episode is brought to you by the Kirtland Partnership Committee. For 30 years, we've been dedicated to supporting, growing, and preserving the Kirtland National Security Complex. We work tirelessly to enhance military readiness, foster community partnerships, improve quality of life, and promote economic development right here in New Mexico. Join us in our mission to ensure that Kirtland remains a cornerstone of national security and a key provider of quality jobs and investment for all of Greater Albuquerque. Together, we can make a powerful impact. Kirtland Partnership Committee, proudly shaping the future of our national security for 30 years.
The recent suicide of 16-year-old Jaden Garcia at a state-run group home in Albuquerque has prompted New Mexico Attorney General Raul Torres to launch a sweeping investigation into the state's child welfare system. Torres announced Tuesday that his office will conduct a comprehensive review of how children placed in state custody, particularly in group homes or CYFD offices, are being treated. Torres called Garcia's death a, quote, tragedy and moral failing. He said the investigation will scrutinize the broader handling of youth removed from their homes by CYFD, citing chronic failures and a lack of transparency.
I think we have all grown tired of waking up, hearing about another child who's been injured, another child who's been hurt, another child in state custody who's been killed. And for that reason, the New Mexico Department of Justice will initiate a formal investigation into the facts and circumstances that led up to the death of Jaden Garcia. But we will not stop there. The state of New Mexico failed to protect this child. The state of New Mexico has failed to honor its legal and moral obligations under a variety of legal agreements that they have entered into. And simply put, enough is enough.
He vowed to make the findings public and hinted at the possibility of criminal inquiries if warranted. Garcia died by suicide on April 12th while staying at a CYFD contracted facility operated by AMI Kids, a Florida nonprofit. Though the home was reportedly fully staffed at the time, at least 10 key positions remain vacant, including executive roles. Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham's office acknowledged the tragedy and stated that CYFD is already conducting an internal investigation. While the governor supports oversight, her office expressed concern that the new Office of Child Advocate, created by a recent law and housed in the AG's office, could be misused to unfairly target CYFD staff. Garcia's tragic death also brings attention to wider concerns about the use of group homes. Federal authorities have discouraged their use, and CYFD has come under repeated scrutiny following reports of abuse, neglect, and inadequate supervision in both group homes and CYFD offices. Torres said the public deserves answers and accountability, and stressed that confidentiality laws should not be used to shield government failures. As of now, 2,121 children are in CYFD custody, but there are only 1,059 licensed foster homes available, leading to reliance on temporary placements. Torres noted that while these issues do predate the current administration, he had hoped for reforms that would improve conditions before now. The Attorney General's probe will aim to identify systematic gaps and ultimately offer recommendations to the newly formed Office of Child Advocate, intended to serve as an independent watchdog for New Mexico's vulnerable youth. The United States Northern Command announced significant expansion to military operations along the U.S.-Mexico border on Tuesday as troops begin, quote, installation security support operations. The goal of these operations is to target individuals crossing the border outside official ports of entry. This development marks an escalation of military involvement in border enforcement under the direction of a new Joint Task Force Southern Border. Stationed at Fort Huachuca in Arizona, the task force has been conducting border reconnaissance since March. The deployment is rooted in President Donald Trump's 2019 National Emergency Declaration and builds on his recent order to designate, quote, national defense areas across federal lands near the border, including the Roosevelt Reservation, which runs through New Mexico, Arizona, and California.
What has recently happened is that
my colleague Algernon DeMassa is the Southern New Mexico correspondent for the Journal.
A strip of land tracing about a 60-foot wide swath of federal land along the border has now been approved for use by the Department of Defense as essentially like a military installation in these areas called national defense areas.
Under these new authorities, military personnel will perform a variety of tasks that include patrolling, surveillance, detaining and searching individuals labeled as, quote, trespassers, providing emergency medical aid, and aiding in construction of border fencing. Those detained will be handed over to the Customs and Border Protection or other law enforcement officers, according to U.S. Northern Command. This move comes despite a drastic 95% drop in border crossings in New Mexico from about 34,000 in December to just over 1,600 in March. The reduced activity has not quelled criticism. Doña Ana County Commissioner Manuel Sanchez slammed the military deployment during a local board meeting.
The solution from the federal government and the White House is to bring the Army in for this, and that's ridiculous because of the fact that when it comes to immigration enforcement, the Border Patrol is so understaffed, and they have not been able to fill their open positions. This is not about not having funding, not about having staff, not about having any of that. It's just they can't get the heads to fill that, so they're going to go and use our armed forces for that reason.
The American Civil Liberties Union of New Mexico also expressed serious concern. Senior Attorney Rebecca Schiff emphasized that while military operations are expanding, local law enforcement remains limited in their legal authority and cannot enforce federal immigration laws unless explicitly directed by the state. She also warned of the dangers of criminalizing migrants through trespass charges and exposing them to military encounters.
It does seem like obviously a very stepped up version of border militarization combined with this kind of effective mandate to enhance prosecutions of border related violations.
As the new operations begin, civil rights advocates and local officials remain wary of increasing militarization at the border and its implications for legal protections and community trust. With Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham out of the country on a 2-week trade mission to Asia, Lieutenant Governor Howie Morales has been acting governor, and in that time, he signed quite a few executive orders. With more on this story, I'm now joined by the Journal's Capitol Bureau Chief, Dan Boyd. Dan, thank you so much for joining me.
You bet. Thanks for having me on.
So Dan, as we touched on at the top, the governor's not only been out of the state, but she's been out of the country, and Lieutenant Governor Morales has signed a few executive orders while she's been gone. Can you give us a little bit of insight about what these orders are and what they aim to accomplish?
Yeah, so under the state constitution, the lieutenant governor serves as acting governor while the governor is outside of New Mexico. And that's not unusual for the governor to travel some to other states, or in this case, as you mentioned, traveling to Japan and to Singapore for a trade mission. But what caught my eye was, the lieutenant governor issuing more than 30 different executive orders, and these orders are targeted primarily at providing some funding for recovery efforts for wildfires and flooding in the Roswell area and the Ruidoso area. And, so I was able to kind of talk to him about this, and he said it was something that was done in consultation with the governor's office, so kind of not that he's going rogue or anything like that, but still kind of interesting to have the lieutenant governor stepping up and issuing, this kind of volume of orders.
And in addition to that disaster recovery funding, what also caught my eye in the story, Dan, is some of the funds in these executive orders are going towards National Guard assistance in Albuquerque, and I'm curious if that had anything to do with the upcoming National Guard operation in conjunction with APD, where National Guardsmen are going to be along Central.
Yeah, it is connected to that effort, and it's kind of this strange twist. Under the state system, it's usually the legislature that appropriates money, under the annual budget bill that we've talked about. But the governor, or in this case, the lieutenant governor, does have the ability to issue these kind of executive orders, and each order can authorize up to $750,000. So that's why you see sometimes multiple orders being issued, just so each one kind of carries that $750,000 appropriation. So most of these, as we've talked about, were for disaster relief, with the expectation the state will get paid back, hopefully from the federal government at some point on these. But also, the effort that the governor announced a few weeks ago about deploying the National Guard in Albuquerque to help with some duties kind of related to law enforcement and things like that. So interesting to see, these orders being issued by the lieutenant governor and kind of without legislative approval, and something that the legislature at times in the past has kind of, expressed a little bit of unease about that.
And Dan, something both your story and the lieutenant governor emphasized is the fact that all of these executive orders are being done in lockstep with the governor, so she's aware aware of all of the actions he's taken.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that was a big question of mine when I first kind of saw these orders being issued. We have seen rarely, but occasionally in other states, situations where lieutenant governor has issued orders, kind of defying the governor while the governor is out of state. That hasn't happened in New Mexico, but was something I certainly wanted to make sure was the case. And both the governor's office, confirmed to me that, that they were aware of the lieutenant governor's orders, and certainly the lieutenant governor himself saying that this had been done in collaboration with the governor's office. So Howie Morales hasn't gone rogue, as of yet. So.
And Dan, last question for you. The governor doesn't return back to New Mexico for another week. Did the lieutenant governor hint at any possible future executive orders he might issue in that time frame?
He didn't say anything specifically. He did say that he kind of can be in touch with the governor's office, certainly if the need arises, that he's prepared to kind of act and do that if necessary. The interesting thing can always be then if he leaves the state as well, then it would be the Secretary of State who would be the acting governor. The lieutenant governor doesn't sound like he has any plans immediately to leave the state this time around, but certainly, it's a situation that's interesting having this authority and having him be ready, in case. And I think one situation that has come up in the past is sometimes a governor not always alerting the lieutenant governor when they're leaving the state. So certainly this kind of, this whole thing kind of highlights the importance of that communication and being ready to react if the governor is outside of New Mexico.
So Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham set to return to New Mexico next week. In the meantime, Lieutenant Governor Howie Morales will carry out his duties as acting governor. Journal Capitol Bureau Chief Dan Boyd filling us in on the latest. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
In other headlines from the newsroom, dinosaur lovers take note. The New Mexico Museum of Natural History and Science in Albuquerque will shut its doors for 7 months starting on August 4th for major renovations. This is the first significant update the museum has seen since 1999. The $3.67 million project will revamp the front entrance, ticket booth, exhibit spaces, and essential infrastructure like plumbing and street systems. Additional funds from the museum's foundation will support a gift shop renovation. Despite the closure, certain programming like First Friday Fractals will continue, and museum staff will take the science and history education on the road to schools, libraries, and public spaces. Meanwhile, museum employees will be reassigned within the Department of Cultural Affairs. When the museum reopens in February 2026, it'll be just in time for its 40th anniversary. Visitors can expect a blend of new traveling and permanent exhibits, as well as modernized updates to the existing displays. Executive Director Anthony Florio emphasized the need to refresh older exhibits in line with current science. To help shape the museum's future, the public is invited to a community engagement event on June 27th and a farewell event that will be held the weekend before the closure. N-15 airmen graduated in the first class of the 54th Operations Support Squadron's newly established F-16 Intelligence Formal Training Unit at Holloman Air Force Base. The course relocated from Luke Air Force Base in Arizona earlier this year after they phased out the F-16 from its programs to focus training solely on the F-35 Lightning II. For 6 weeks, students learned about radar operations, an overview of the F-16, and how adversaries' capabilities compare to the aircraft. If you like hearing all of the latest news from the Albuquerque Journal here on the Leading News, consider becoming a digital subscriber to the Albuquerque Journal. You can check our show notes for a discount code on a digital subscription and keep up with all the latest news from New Mexico's leading news source. Now taking a look at Albuquerque's weather forecast. Today you can expect sunny skies with a high near 83, and as for this evening, mostly clear with a low around 48. To keep up with all the latest news from the Albuquerque Journal, you can visit our website at abqjournal.com. That's the Leading News. I'm Gino Gutierrez. We'll be back tomorrow.